I serve as the director of early stage banking at Silicon Valley Bank in the healthcare life sciences space. By background, I have a PhD in molecular biology, spent close to a decade in academic tech transfer, basically being at the intersection of business, intellectual property, and science, helping early stage founders, monetize and translate technologies from the lab into the marketplace. And I have a stellar panel here with Francisco and Jason and Bishen from Microsoft. I'll let each of them introduce themselves, and for the sake of the audience here and the audience that are joining us virtually, I'll request them to dig a little deeper about their organizations and what they're doing here. How are they serving the healthcare sector? So Francisco, I'll start with you first.
Okay, thank you, Pooja. My name is Francisco Primero Narvaez. I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I am a founder and CEO of two healthcare startups. One of them is Axon Digital Health, which is a company that helps healthcare companies to thrive in the digital and technological industries. The other one is called Catalysia, which uses artificial intelligence to help chronic patients with conversational models via WhatsApp and some other tools. The idea is to, obviously, I came here all the way from Argentina to obviously get to learn from amazing professionals here and to share some insights and obviously to understand better all of the innovation part of the healthcare industry in the US.
My name is Jason Macaleer. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Transcarent. I'm a management consultant by background, but for about the past 8 years, I've been in digital health. I got my start in digital health about 8 years ago at a company called Livongo, where I ran the employer sales team. And then through the acquisition of Teladoc, I stuck around for about 2 years doing that, and then joined Transcarent about a year ago, just shy of a year ago, because I truly believe in the mission here at Transcarent, which I think we'll have a chance to get into in a little bit. So that's me, Bishen.
Hey everyone, Bishen Singh. I'm an advisor at Microsoft. I focus on bringing Azure and Microsoft's tools and technologies within the health and life science space to address a variety of different use cases, including physician decision support, biomedical research, anything that enables researchers, physicians to do their jobs more efficiently, more cost effectively, and with better insights.
Great, thank you. So again, I think everybody here in the audience has the appreciation of the fact that the healthcare system in this country and elsewhere is pretty complex. There are certain challenges and many headwinds that the healthcare system faces. I think the top ones that are on everybody's mind, and most of the organizations, are healthcare costs, access to healthcare, and all of these topics we've briefly touched upon today during the sessions, quality of care and disparities. So maybe I can start with Jason. How is Transcarent changing the landscape, or touching upon these issues and trying to solve for these challenges?
Great question. So I think, let me kind of frame it. So when you think about cost of care and kind of the main payers of care in the country, there's sort of three buckets. There's individuals through ACA exchanges in the marketplace, there's the government, and then there's employers. And employers represent just about half of the people that get health insurance in this company. And that's really where Transcarent is attacking the problem and the cost from. It's the perspective of the employer and really the self-funded employer. So that's kind of our target. And when we talk about how we can really reduce costs, which I think is ultimately the question here, there's a couple ways that we would do that. The first is through an alignment of incentives so that the patient, or in this case, the employee, the provider, and the payer, the employer, are all trying to achieve the same goal. And Transcarent approaches that through the lens of access, affordability, and quality. And I will kind of tease that out into two different things. There's the whole question around appropriateness of care. If you're really going to move the needle on total cost of care, you have to have a lens into where can we deliver the most appropriate care and when. And then when you do deliver that care, it has to be through highest quality. I'll use an example to kind of tease this out, and the best example I can use is in the kind of the vein or the lens of surgery, because I think it's something that's very relatable. And so today, in today's model, at least here in the US, if you go to your PCP, your primary care physician, and you get a recommendation for surgery, 9 times out of 10, that physician is going to refer you to the ortho up the street for a follow-up visit and ultimately the surgery if you need it. And most of us will go up the street to the ortho, get the recommendation, get the surgery after typically some follow-up. And we don't tend to think twice about it. And that's the model. And unfortunately, that's a really expensive and broken model. In the Transcarent world, what we're trying to do is intervene as soon as we can, sometimes to the point of we are actually the ones delivering the surgery recommendation. But if we're not, we like to intervene in that patient or that member's journey and do a couple things. First is, does the person truly need surgery? I think we know anywhere from 10 to 20% of surgeries are avoidable. And so there's a decent chunk of surgeries that we can actually prevent. And we can prevent them by taking all the information that we have on that member or that patient and circulating that data with the world's best surgeons for that particular type of surgery. Okay, that's kind of the traditional second opinion model. And oftentimes we can intervene and recommend other care paths like physical therapy, virtual physical therapy. You guys have heard of Hinge and Sword, so there's groups like that we can intervene and offer more appropriate care in that way. In the event the person does need surgery, then it becomes a matter of, okay, how do we get that person access to the highest quality surgeons? And that's really where Transcarent has a different approach, where we are out there contracting with health systems, with facilities, with providers that do that particular surgery at the top of their quality range. And we look at quality of care, appropriateness of care, complication rates, ED rates, mortality rates, even sort of patient-provided quality metrics. And so we're really looking at a robust data set and trying to intervene and drive that person, or at least inform and educate that person so that they can go to the most appropriate care for the best quality surgery. So that's, in a nutshell, using probably a fairly crude example, how Transcarent works today.
Great, thank you. Bishen, moving to you, everybody knows about Azure and, the cloud computing, the storage services, the backend data analytics that Azure provides. So from your perspective, being a leader, in the data science space and the work that you've done previously before you were part of Microsoft, how is Azure leading the way, as one of the top tech companies in the world? How are you making a dent in the healthcare space?
That's a great question, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So there's a couple of different ways. I was talking to a group of physicians earlier this week, actually, who were describing 2 big problems they're trying to solve. One, and we're all kind of familiar with these problems. One is that they spend a lot of time figuring out what questions to ask their patient before a visit, before the patient comes in, so that they can get exactly what they need as quickly as possible. And then after the visit, they spend a lot of time writing their notes down. So at the end of the day, they're not able to practice, they're not able to spend as much time as they want working with patients, helping them address their problems, because the opportunity cost is they're having to do all this pre-work and post-work to make it all happen. So where Microsoft comes in and helps situations like this is through tools like Nuance. So Microsoft bought Nuance a little while ago, and Nuance is able to listen to conversations securely and confidentially between patients and providers to figure out exactly what needs to be captured in the notes beforehand or afterwards. And then also, before a physician comes in, we can pair it with the right algorithms using some of our other tools so that physicians can know exactly what questions to ask. So we cut down on the time providers are able to have to do all this and increase the time they're able to spend with patients and solve more problems. That's just one example on the provider side. On the research side, we're able to do a lot. So if you imagine during COVID, when there was only one person who was able to use one ventilator at a time, we were able to double that using modeling fluid dynamics because it's not as simple as creating a T-piece for a ventilator to support multiple patients. You actually have to understand how various patients' lungs are working, lung capacity is changing due to COVID, and then how to optimize the airflow to support multiple patients on one ventilator. So that's another way Microsoft was able to support, using our high-performance computing capabilities, patient outcomes ultimately. And then more recently, I was talking to a physician scientist who was working on figuring out how changes in the liver manifest over time, and some changes that were too hard to perceive with just a human eye. So we have tools that are able to detect, using machine learning, the volume of a liver across multiple scans, so that you can see if the volume of the liver is changing, and then, or within a particular area is changing, so that you can then tell the patient, okay, there's something happening here, and based on what I see, here's the best intervention. So there's many different ways that Microsoft's helping across the board, from research, even drug development, modeling which drugs best fit into receptors, and then as well on the provider side to end-to-end add value within the healthcare space using the Azure cloud.
Thanks, Bishen. That's super insightful. We'll turn my question to Francisco. You're not part of mainland US. You primarily focus on working with digital health companies in Argentina. Can you share what the landscape is like in Argentina, and maybe some insights as to what's coming down the line in the digital health space, promises, challenges that you're seeing from your perspective?
Well, it's kind of a mess. Obviously, I won't sugarcoat it. Not only Argentina, all of South America, and many other industries, healthcare industries, are kind of messy right now, and we can see it every day. But the thing is, what we see is that these kind of problems foster innovation, because once you have this roadblock, these roadblocks to access, for example, there's a place in which there's an innovation that can be made, right? And for instance, we have, as everybody else in the market and in the globe, we have problems with adherence. And we are right now with one of our digital tools trying to deal with these kind of problems. I can put an example, for instance, of a very particular disease that it's in the north of Argentina. It's called Chagas disease. It's caused by a bug, and one of the things that happened is that there's a treatment. There's a 3-month treatment that people could be, easily take, and it's cheap, and it has no problems, no adverse events whatsoever. But there's a lack of adherence and a lack of completion, and that leads to lots of patients that develop heart attacks and other cardiac diseases. And what we are doing is trying to help them with conversational platforms that run on technologies like ChatGPT, for instance, and run where patients are. What we are trying to do is, to bring access to the people instead of making them come to us. So, for example, we work with WhatsApp, that is the most established communications mean. I know that I'm mentioning WhatsApp, and there's a regulatory head here in the audience that is about to have a heart attack. But thing is, we try to focus on this, to be where patients already are and help them with their processes. And we make this conversation, kind and polite and encouraging for helping them to thrive on their treatment. And that also not only helps with providing access, but also lowering the overall cost of the healthcare system.
That's great. Francisco, since we have you here, would you want to double click on maybe a few similarities or dissimilarities that you see between the digital health landscape here in the US versus Argentina? Where do you see that going maybe in the next year or 5 years?
Oh, my mic fell. Okay, so put this. Can you guys hear me? It's okay? Thank you. What I'm seeing is that we are kind of similar and kind of different in many ways. We both markets have, for example, access issues, not the same access issues, but we all have access issues. We all have a thriving community of innovators, and not only Argentina, but all of South America have this amazing community of people, bringing innovations to many industries, and healthcare is one of them. Obviously, in a different scale as the US, but if you count all of Latin America, we are 600 million people, so it's a large enough market to serve. We have many of the same challenges in terms of healthcare, costs and accessibility, obviously, and some derivated problems from the pandemic. There's a mental health so-called pandemic as well that is going on worldwide, and South America is not an exception. But the thing is, we are seeing a very interesting entrepreneurial spirit that it's replicated north and south.
Great, thank you. I know I started the panel with, challenges and headwinds in the healthcare sector. So, Jason, a question for you. Over the years, at least in the recent past, we've seen a good amount of deal activity going into provider operation based technologies and ventures, and there's a lot of interest and buzz around value-based care, at least in the last 5 to 10 years. Have you seen a meaningful shift in that direction, and is Transcarent doing something in that space?
Yeah, so certainly, and again, we're taking a somewhat different approach where while we have providers that are delivering care, we're really focused on the employers and the employer members or the employees. But I think to answer your question, yeah, value-based care is something that I think everybody's now looking at or doing in some way, shape, or form more than others. If you look at just sort of the employer landscape in the last 10 years, you have seen an explosion of what we call point solutions, or these digital health kind of startup programs. And having worked at one, I can tell you they work really well for the pockets of members that they are designed to serve. And I say that because there are employers now that have 30 plus point solutions in place now, and it's really become untenable. And so if I am a member, and I am your average person living with a chronic condition like diabetes or hypertension, I am likely going to have to work with 6, 7, 8 of these point solutions, none of which talk to each other or share information with each other. And so the landscape is fairly frustrating for the member. And then you look at the employer, which now has an ecosystem of 30 plus point solutions that they have to launch, communicate, manage, and support. And so it's really kind of untenable. It's reached this breaking point. I think what is happening now is these employers are starting to look and say, okay, where is the consolidation occurring? Where is the one place I can go from a member's perspective to get all the care I need? And then if I'm going to do that, I need that one place to be the place I go to also measure my total cost of care. And if I'm not saving money through that one place, then I need to look elsewhere. And I think that fundamentally is what Transcarent does differently, is we can help consolidate these ecosystems and also be that one throat to choke around total cost of care, or in this case, value-based care. So the more people that use it, the more outcomes you see, the more outcomes you see, the more cost savings you see. And that's the flywheel that keeps this thing working. But I think that's what uniquely positions a company like Transcarent to kind of weather this kind of storm that I think you're alluding to, Pooja.
Great, thank you. Bishen, I'll tweak the question for you a little bit, staying on the subject about value-based care, and how technology can have a positive impact. If you can think of an example or two of how your team at Microsoft Azure have worked closely with organizations to have an impact in the value-based care sector?
Yeah, that's a great question. So ultimately, Microsoft is an enablement company. So what we try to do is make everyone else's life easier using the tools and technologies that we offer. So in terms of value-based care, I think the name of the game in general, as my co-panelists pointed out, is just lowering costs and increasing access. And I think where our tools plug into that is they enable exactly that, right? So, if you bring in pattern recognition, which is, ML, AI, anything like that, right, which is what Microsoft provides to the, healthcare game, then you can figure out what's happening more efficiently, right? It's easier if the computer does it than if a human does it. It's cheaper. And so if you build that into the care workflow, then you lower costs, and in value-based care, it becomes a more successful model. So I think that's one perspective. The other perspective is it shifts the way care works to be more preventative rather than curative, which I think is a great shift to make in general, because at the end of the day, if patients want to be healthier, then a good way to prevent health issues from coming up is by living in a way that prevents that from happening. So patients we see are now using ChatGPT and our version of it, which is called Azure OpenAI, to ask questions, right? I think a lot of us probably do this. You can just ask, previously we'd ask Google or whatever, or I should say Bing, what's happening to me based on some symptoms. Now you can ask Azure OpenAI or ChatGPT the same thing, and you get a whole bunch of additional information that's probably way more useful and way more relevant to you. So at the end of the day, I think that's helping the provider side. Providers can do that as well, right? Provider side by lowering costs, increasing the business value, value-based care, and then also on the patient side by enabling them to have access to more health literacy, also more awareness of what to do to manage their health and reduce the risk of being sick and affected by negative conditions that would then increase the cost of care.
I love this, and again, I don't know if you would be having this conversation maybe a year ago. I mean, so much has transformed. Healthcare systems, hospital systems, they still remain strapped for resources, whether to expend on workforce enhancement or, adopting new technologies. I think, with the advent of and the adoption of, AI, ML, and harnessing data science, I think that dilemma and the decision making is somewhat easier for payers, providers, healthcare systems. So love that.